Welcome to episode 41 of the Talent Intelligence Collective podcast, where returning champions bring fresh perspectives on the evolving world of talent insights. I'm joined once again by my brilliant co-hosts Alison Ettridge and Toby Coulshaw from Lightcast for what turned out to be a masterclass in how TI has matured from mystical promise to business critical capability. In Toby's news roundup, we dug into Stanford's Canary in the coal mine study on AI's employment effects, though Toby rightly questioned whether it's correlation or causation when entry-level jobs disappear. We also covered the ongoing saga of the UK labour force survey, with response rates that would make any researcher weep, and Deloitte's warning that the war for talent continues, particularly in those same old GPS hotspots. But the real treat was welcoming back Kim Bryant from AMS, nearly 3 years after her first appearance in June 22. Now Global Head of Research, leading AMS's new research lab, Kim brought fascinating insights from analysing 400,000 hiring records across 100 countries. Among the revelations we uncovered, why sales roles are the most volatile for offer declines, but project management was the surprise outlier, how compensation isn't the main reason people reject offers, it's everything from flexibility to hiring process experience, the evolution from TI being an expensive mystical add-on to an expected core capability, why despite all the AI and automation, the recruiter-candidate relationship still makes or breaks the hiring process. Plus, Kim's top tips for TA leaders, there's a mouthful, including the importance of creative space and finding joy outside work. Refreshingly human advice in our tech-obsessed world. So, settle in for a conversation that spans continents, decades of experience, and the fundamental truth that people still matter most. So, stay curious, stay data-driven, and most importantly, stay intelligent, folks. Bye! Before we get on with the main event, I wanted to remind you that Lightcast kindly sponsors this podcast. Here's a very well-spoken chap to tell you more about them.
Lightcast is the global authority on labour market data. By collecting, analysing and refining profiles, job postings and market data globally, Lightcast provides actionable, data-driven talent intelligence, giving HR leaders the context to make better decisions. The world's top companies trust Lightcast to deliver clarity in a complex world of work. For more, visit lightcast.io.
What happens when you combine global talent insights, cutting-edge research, and nearly a decade of industry leadership? You get a talent intelligence superstar. This is episode 41 of the Talent Intelligence Collective podcast, and we've got a returning champion with us today.
Yay!
Yay, indeed. In the virtual studio with me are my brilliant co-hosts Alison Ettridge and Toby Coulshaw from Lightcast. Give us a noisy wave, team.
Hello!
Toby, are you there?
Oh, I've made the dogs bark now, sorry.
No. Set them all
fine.
off.
That's a form of welcome. It'll do. Now it's been nearly 3 years since we had today's guest on the show. Back in June 2022, episode 18 for those that are keeping track. She brings decades of experience. Sorry, Kim, I sound really old. She brings lots of experience from the front line of talent intelligence. Please welcome back to the show, Kim Bryant.
Thank you very much for having me, Alan.
You're more than welcome. So for those that might not know you, just in case, and because 3 years have passed since our last episode, and for anybody who didn't catch your first appearance in it, could you give us a bit of an update? Tell us who you are and what you're up to nowadays and how your career has moved on since we last chatted.
Absolutely. So, hi everyone, I'm Kim Bryant. I'm the Global Head of Research here at AMS. I have been with AMS for, it's nearly coming up to 10 years this time. I'm a bit of a boomeranger. I was with them for many years before that too, and it's definitely coming up to nearly the second decade when you add it all up together. This time I am heading up a new think tank for AMS in terms of the research lab. But before that, I looked after talent intelligence for AMS and a global team of 120, I think, at its peak. And then before that, I had a bit of a varied career across insurance and HR, a really odd mix of both kind of numbers and people, which is probably why I've ended up in all things intelligence and insights. I think it's a happy marriage of those two things.
Excellent. That's an amazing introduction. Thank you very much. For those that are new to the podcast, here's how we'll roll for the next hour or so. First up, Toby's going to give us his trademark market intelligence roundup. Then Alison will be leading our chat with Kim, and I suspect we'll have some amazing discussions around what she's doing in the world of research. Toby, after one of the most bumbling intros I think I've ever done, I'm going to hand over to you for your usual professionalism with the news.
I like the fact you're saying the usual professionalism. You're not setting up for anything great here. But we'll run with that. It's an intro, isn't it? So one of the bits I've been reading this week was the Stanford Digital Economy Lab did a study on AI's effect on employment. And they called it the Canaries in the Coal Mine, 6 facts about the recent employment effects of artificial intelligence. It's quite a long title. Some interesting bits in there, but also bits I'm not sure I agree with. And we've discussed elements of it in the past on the pod. But the main findings were young workers in AI-exposed roles see a significant 13% relative employment decline, while older workers experience growth. The effect is concentrated in jobs with AI automated tasks. So it's the whole task automation rather than role replacement. Big hit on entry-level hiring, and it's not really a piece on salary. It's more the actual jobs aren't there. All very interesting, all very valid. I'm not 100% convinced that it's not a correlation versus causation piece. I think there's a lot of research has been done around this at the moment, and it's all coming to a similar piece around AI is replacing entry-level workers. There's less entry-level jobs. But I think that the contextual piece that a lot of this misses is the economy. And every time the economy tightens, the first piece that gets hit is entry-level workers. And you see graduate hiring drop on every single time the economy tightens. And none of them ever really seem to address this. Now, don't get me wrong. Do I think certain roles are being impacted with this stuff more than others? Are certain tasks being impacted? For sure. I'm just not convinced that it's in the way we think it is. I think ultimately the way that this will play through is that the design of entry-level roles will change, and we might expect more from people in entry-level roles because they are going to have AI assistants or whatever. But I just don't think it's going to have this full-on reduction in entry-level requirements that people are professing.
There has got to be an entry level of a form. Otherwise, nobody's entering the workplace, are they?
Yeah, exactly.
It's just the type of roles that they'll be doing will be different.
Yeah, I think that's the point. It's all about how are you using AI to augment a role, not to automate a role. I think you're right, Toby, in so many ways. I think this is probably just causation rather than anything else due to the economy. But equally, businesses don't really know what's going on, and they don't really understand the impact of AI. They don't know where to look in any of their functions. So when you look at the confusion that's going on in businesses around the impact of AI, and then you combine that with the tightened economy, it's almost naturally the first thing we're going to do is stop hiring young people. We don't know what we're going to do with them. You can kind of see how that could become a cycle. It's worth, for those people who haven't read it, it's worth reading the Beyond the Buzz report that's out on AI skills. And Kim, I know, has got one as well that we can talk about a bit later. But there's lots of research in this space. I think this is probably, don't read just one report and believe it. Read lots, particularly because this one is 57 pages long.
Yeah, I think it's really easy to lay the blame at the foot of AI too. And I completely agree with you, Toby. I think it's so much more complex than that, with all of the variations and changes and evolution in skills hiring and the economy, all of it put together. It's a little bit of a perfect storm. And also, I think there's a huge pressure on businesses to make associated savings with AI, to say, okay, this is coming in so we can either reduce our headcount or claim efficiencies with it, when they're not really sure exactly where AI can benefit. And this is the easiest place for them to make that change.
Definitely. It's interesting, isn't it? Because whatever AI is doing in terms of replacing work that is being done, so the tasks, etc., that people used to do, that now can potentially be automated with AI, and that's a different subject as to whether does it well at all. But whatever it's replacing, the decision to make layoffs is still very much a human one.
Yeah.
Often organisations are being forced to make these efficiency savings for no other reason than greed and profiteering. And that's why they're being forced to do it ultimately. Not because they have to survive or anything like that. They're doing it because they want to increase the shareholder value. And I'm not saying that's necessarily wrong either, but we shouldn't be blaming AI for layoffs. We should be blaming the humans who are using AI as an excuse for the layoffs.
Yeah, and there are the report says there are places where it is most obvious, like software development and customer support. Well, you would expect those to be areas, actually, regardless of age, where AI is going to have a biggest impact, because you can definitely automate code and you can definitely automate a level of customer support, right? So it's just that it doesn't feel like that's a young person thing. That just feels like that's a role thing.
Well, interestingly, I was on a thread last night on Reddit where it was a software engineering thread, and there was a lead developer talking about AI's impact on his team. So he led a team, I think like 10 developers. Everybody reported to him. He referred to as junior developers, and he said that the kind of latest iterations of tools like Cursor that are powered by Gemini or ChatGPT or one of the other large language models have enabled him to basically, whereas he was hiring almost every 2 or 3 months to keep his team at 10 people, because he had to, because people were often poached, they went elsewhere, etc. So he was always in a hiring cycle of some form. He hasn't hired anybody new for 12 months. And his productivity, his work, what their team are actually pushing out, has maintained what it was before, even though his team has shrunk from this 10 down to, I think he said 7. So he's lost 30% of his headcount and is delivering the same amount of work still.
Yeah.
So that's obviously in a microcosm and a very small sample size, but it's probably relatively reflective. And he was saying he's gone from he has to spend typically per sprint with each of his junior developers. He probably gives them 3 or 4 hours of his time before they kind of head off and do things, and then he checks in with them every so often, see how they're going on. He's saying now when he spends time with a tool like Cursor that's doing some of the heavy lifting around the coding, he's spending 10, 15 minutes with it for the same task, the same deliverable. So who would have thought, Alison, that, any of you here, but Alison, you mentioned customer service and developers side by side. Who would have thought 5 years ago would have been putting those two groups of folk in the same pool in terms of being impacted by tech? Bonkers, isn't it?
Yeah, it is completely bonkers. I don't think anybody knows, right? We can do all of the research. We can do all the research in the world, but it's all historical looking. And this is moving. The pace of change is so fast that it's kind of like, well, I'm not sure there's any point in looking backwards, right? It's just because we have no idea what's going to come around the corner. We've just got to go with it.
You've got to be agile, haven't you, and adjust and be able to course correct really quickly, because weird shit is happening, and it's happening at a rapid rate of pace.
Exactly.
I think the thing that I noticed, we did a study here. It was an AI study on jobs beyond tech, which I've forgotten. Beyond the buzz.
Beyond the buzz.
Look at me getting all corporate and getting the right title and everything. But the thing that really stood out to me, the whole report, really interesting report, I really liked it. But the bit that stood out for me was across all functions, when you look at kind of which areas people are using AI and related terms in, the one that's completely devoid is anything to do with governance or risk or control. And I honestly just feel like we're in a period of absolute shiny magpies where everyone's like, oh, look at all these amazing things we can do. And we're all cracking into it and everyone's just using it and everyone's just kind of cracking on. But there's no control in it. There's no control or stability or structure. We had chats with Antonio and Bob years back on human-centered AI design. And I just feel like we're just so far from that at the moment. It's like the Wild West of everyone just going and playing and doing stuff. And, saying, look how much I've saved, look at the efficiency gain. And it's like, well, yeah, but what's the true cost of this? What are you actually doing? It's slightly concerning for me.
I think that might be the new world, though. I think that is the new world, and we're going to have to accept it and be agile, as Alan said, and just course correct the whole time. And as you course correct, you're going to learn your rules.
Absolutely. Hey, let's remember when the internet, we're all old enough here to remember the internet properly came around. Ask Jeeves was looked on as being incredible, and we were blown away by its capabilities.
Yeah. Fliss said to me the other day, she said, what's Yahoo, Mummy? And I went, oh, wow. That was like a bit of a kind of blast from the past. It was just a bit weird. I went, that was really big when Mummy was young.
And to any Yahoo listeners out there, I'm sure you're still very big. I'm still very, very relevant.
Still relevant because she still saw it, right? So still here and still a brand.
Exactly.
So what else is happening, Toby?
The joys of the UK Labour Force Survey and the Office of National Statistics is bubbling away as always. There's been a couple of articles around its effectiveness once again. It's a really interesting topic. I get kind of torn on this one, as we know. The ex-chief and former head of the ONS said that essentially they're hamstrung by Treasury funding constraints and they just don't have enough resources, so they're getting drawn into different areas. And he goes into the difference between kind of a statistical office versus an economist office. I find this just wild, both in terms of when you compare, like the closest comparison at a national level would be kind of the US current population survey. And for kind of comparison figures, back in like 2015, the US CPS was an 80-something percent, essentially a 90% response rate. And the UK Labour Force Survey was like 47% or something. And they've both declined. And the US CPS is down like, 68%, something like that now. UK Labour Force Survey actually went right down to about 12, 13%, and it's back up to 20%. So we've always struggled. We've always struggled to get the population engaged on this Labour Force Survey. And they've made efforts to try and brute force it. They've made efforts to kind of give better incentives around it, et cetera, et cetera. But for me, I find it fascinating that it's such a big, important piece that we're just not funding to get the results. Like when you've got the head of the service saying, we're not funding this sufficiently to get what you need, the work from this is absolutely core to everything from kind of the Bank of England, the Treasury, the Office of Budget Responsibility. It's like core to the financial planning of the government and the interest rate setting and everything else. When you've got the head of the ONS saying, you're not funding us enough to do this properly, so you're getting bad data out, and yet we just continue, and they're not. I find it a fascinating one. I'm like, I don't know what the right solution is, but it seems to be a really strange, almost like political hot potato where people almost don't want it to work. I don't know. It feels very strange to me.
Are people scared of the answers?
I think that's a big part of it too, and I think it's how much money is it going to cost to fix, because I think there's a kind of tale of two cities here where the ONS has had, I don't want to use the word old-fashioned, but it has had methodologies and ways of working for a long time, and have they been working as they should for the time that they've been operating? I think that's debatable. But even if you look at whenever they did the COVID-19 infection survey, there was, I think the latest figures was something like 988 million that they spent on that, and that was how they were able to very quickly get all of those numbers and get all of that data. I actually took part in that survey, and they paid, I think it started off, they paid £50 per person for every single response that they gave. So that was how they very quickly got to that data. So I think when they're able to put money in, they're able to get the appropriate data out. I just think whoever's doing the calculations around how much it's going to cost to fix, they've obviously got a number that's just too scary for anyone to contemplate.
My question to hopefully one of you three who are way smarter than I about this kind of stuff was, where is the cost? And you kind of answered a bit of that, Kim. It's actually in gathering the data itself, is it, rather than the analysis?
Yeah, I think a lot of it they still hire individuals to go round door to door to take some of those surveys. It's still a very manual process. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of that needs to be looked at too.
I think what's interesting though, when I read this article, because I'm with you, Toby, it feels like this has been bubbling away and there's really important decisions that happen as a result of this. But the bit that shocked me was there was a figure in it that showed the response rate, and it had the US current population survey and it had the UK labour force survey. And in 2016, we'd still got less than a 50% response rate, and it's just been diving ever since. But I think that means that for the last 10 years, we've been making decisions based on less than a 50% response rate. I mean, it's just that for me was just mind-boggling, never mind the fact that it's dropped and we're still doing it in an old-fashioned way. Whereas in the US, it was 90 or nearly 90%. You do start to question the validity of both the approach and the stats and the very, like all of these things. I'm going to sound like a broken record. It's historic data because it has to be, because of the way that you're gathering it and then analysing it and doing it. And that just means that it's out of date so fast. I don't think there is an answer, and I'm not sure money is the answer, actually.
I think
I'm
it
not
does
sure
leave the
money
door
is.
open, doesn't it, for external companies to come in like that they have in the US.
Yeah.
Well, I don't understand why they don't tie in closer with other government bodies. So if you think about like labour force survey, it's all looking at kind of obviously what the labour force is made up of and how many people are in it, etc., etc. Well, we all pay tax. Well, why can't they just tie in? And this is me being oversimplification as always, but why can't they just tie in with like HMRC or just to look at the numbers there? And it's a triangulation thing. Like tie that in. I know they use external labour market data to look at the job count in the UK, for example, and that's all published and publicly available. So they've got an idea of the number of jobs being advertised. If they can't do HMRC, time like the payroll providers or like people have got to be paid somehow. It doesn't. It feels like they've got all the data just in different government bodies, and they just don't want to talk to each other with it. I don't know. It feels baffling to me.
I think it's really easy for us, having spent a long time in this space, all of us, to go, I don't know why they just don't join the dots on this. It's, but actually, if you take a step back, we know this data is really scrappy. We know it's really messy. We know it's in thousands of places, and we know it's all in a different language. And I mean, title, skills, employed, not employed, permanent, part-time, consultant, gig. It is really messy data to try to sort out. So I think it's very easy for us, having been in the industry for a long time, to go, well, why don't they just do this? They need a proper TI person in there leading it and talking about it. I think that's the reality.
Do you know what? The geek in me now wants to try and work out how many people they actually have working on this study. And if we were running it as an equivalency, what sort of headcount we'd look to have on that sort of resource, on that sort of study. Because my gut feel, I think you're probably right. I think they probably don't have enough people working on it, is the short answer as well.
And enough of the right people. I think too. It's probably a skills mismatch there too.
Yeah, I think that's the point. This is not, forgive me, just data gathering. It's understanding where all of that data is, all of the different data points, and how to make it all talk to each other, to become relevant and to draw the insight from it.
Yeah.
5,500 people apparently the Office for National Statistics employs. I don't know how many of those are working on this specifically.
I was going to say they do other stuff as well, don't they?
Yeah, of course, yeah. All national statistics kind of thing. But still a big old business. Big old organisation. Clearly not a business, but a big old organisation. But, yeah.
Well, I'm sure that the brains on this call, this pod, could help them out. So if anybody from the ONS is listening, we're more than happy to talk to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Toby, have we got time for one or maybe even two more bits of news?
Well, we've got as much news as you got time for, but let's kick off with another one. A couple of bits I wanted to talk about. One was, once again, about AI, and the AI sector is prioritising skills over formal education. So this is a piece of research by Oxford Internet Institute and the University of Oxford. Dr. Fabienne Stephanie, who's the departmental research leader for AI and work, said, our research suggests that the UK's labour market is undergoing a fundamental shift. The traditional path of university education leading to higher pay is no longer the default for AI professionals, who are now being rewarded for practical skills and industry-specific know-how. Which is interesting. We've spoke ad nauseum on this pod over the years around how the education system isn't rapid enough in development. It's not keeping up with the industry needs. And I think what this paper is suggesting, to me at least, is what we're seeing in AI is kind of the turbocharge of that the market just moves so much faster than traditional education that it's a bit of this is ironically, considering the name of the previous paper, but this is probably a canary in the coal mine for the education system in a lot of ways, in my mind.
And it's nice of the education system themselves to confirm it to us.
Yes, exactly that.
I think that we're definitely starting to see a shift in education establishments going, right, we have got to figure out what are the skills that we actually teach in a course, and what do those skills mean for a career path for individuals, and then what does that mean for the education and the formal education as they leave? Is it going to be a degree that covers all things, or actually is it going to be lots of mini certificates that when they add up become a thing? I think there's a massive transformation, and I have a feeling this will be led by the US, because we know that US organisations are jumping into skills more quickly than potentially European businesses, albeit that feels like it's changing slightly. But I think this is leading to a major overhaul of the education system, which is a good thing.
Definitely. And also, all of those skills that are learned, are they really skills until they've been tested in anger?
Yes.
You know what I mean? Just because you have a certificate so you can do something, doesn't mean you can do it until you've actually proven you can do it.
It depends on
and they've been validated.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly the point, isn't it? Because it depends entirely on the course. If you're going to operate on a dog and you're a vet, you'd like to think you've practiced that a bit through. Yeah. Rather than there's your certificate, crack on, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and our education system really hasn't changed fundamentally in a very, very long time. Yes, what we call the qualifications has changed, but fundamentally it hasn't changed really since, post-industrial revolution. And I think there is a bit of a, we're actually doing a piece on this right now. I think we're hoping to publish it next month. For me, it is very much an education revolution. I thought that's a great headline, then realised it's been used before, so I can't use that. But it definitely is something that is coming, and I think this all feeds into what we talked about right at the beginning about the drop in the graduate hiring and entry hiring. It's all connected to the fact that employers aren't necessarily looking for those same educational qualifications or even topics that we've been so heavily relying on for the past 50 years.
Or maybe they are, and that's what's causing them their problems. Yeah,
I think it's to Alison's your point earlier, though. It's the relevancy of the course. So I don't want to come across as I hate education. I was a terrible student personally, and I've spoken on the pod before around the fact I home educate my kids. But I think education in the right way is absolutely vital. And I think one of the bits of work I know one of the teams here do is looking at the kind of the economic impact study of different courses or qualifications, or the future career trajectories of certain qualifications over others. And I think that's what I really like. It's what's the value and the return of this work? Because I think the problem is there's just too much education happening where it's for the sake of the education provider rather than the student. And students are coming out with a set of skills and qualifications that just aren't relevant. And that's what frustrates me, is if they were coming out and there was a bang-on return on investment at this time and effort, and it's going to improve your life, brilliant, I'm all for it. It's where they're almost being sold a dream and then having the rug pulled under them. That's what frustrates me with the system.
And it's going to change and keep changing at speed as more organisations become skills based. It has to, because people are hiring for ability to move people around and create a flexible workforce. And that is going to involve a whole bunch of soft skills that aren't necessarily taught in the education system today.
Yeah, it's like a return to the old, kind of apprenticeships and more schemes like that. And those are seeing a little bit of a resurgence. And I
Yes.
do think that we'll see more of them in the future.
Yeah. As someone who spends an absolute blinking fortune on her child's education, I'm still kind of hoping I'm going to get some sort of ROI on it.
In the form of them caring once they leave home. Is that the ROI you're looking for, Alison?
I don't think I care. Just anything.
I think the attitude, though, of students themselves is changing too, because I know certainly in my generation, it was very much the thing of, you go to university and you get a job, and that's, there's quite a defined path for you to follow. Whereas I know certainly my kids are 19 and 16, and my 16-year-old is really interested in a career in hairdressing because she feels that that's a more sustainable career for her than
Yeah.
anything else. I'm absolutely happy to support that with her, and I think we are seeing, and that's not it's not a unique kind of mindset.
No.
There's quite a few of her peers that they're looking for much more practical sources of employment rather than necessarily going down the education route.
Which is awesome, isn't it? Right? What are we always going to need? Plumbers, electricians, hairdressers. Right? You're not going to have a robot come in and cut your hair. It's just like, no way. Just perfect.
Alan could. Alan would have no issues with that at all. Just
I
laser
was
it off from
about to
40
say,
foot.
as a bald man, I'm the least, the last person that should be commenting on this. But even I would not be so welcoming of risk to let a robot cut my hair.
When I cut Dave's hair during COVID the first time, and I am not a robot, and I'm not a hairdresser either. Fliss called him Acorn Head, and I think he looked a bit like Beaker out of the Muppets for quite some time. So I wasn't allowed to do it again.
He also only has one ear now.
Luckily, I didn't wound him. Luckily.
Bang off, Dave. Love it.
Oh, let's do one more bit of news then, Toby. Only because I've read the title and I've got the rage over it. The old term that they use.
Oh, it must be the Deloitte continuing warning for the war for talent will continue
That's
in
it,
coming
the war
years.
for talent.
War for talent.
It's not the war on talent, which people used to use.
Exactly that. So it's off the back of the 2025 Deloitte Global Business Services Survey. So it is specifically tied to GBS. And 50% of companies with GBS, so Global Business Services operations, plan to expand their presence and face major challenges in finding the right people. I'm not hugely surprised by this in the sense of, if you look at most GBS hubs, they are being very traditional. They're all going into the very traditional low-cost country centres generally. So there is going to be a squeeze on the availability of talent just because you're all putting all your global business service centres in the same places. It feels, and this is the TI geek in me, it feels like a lot of these decisions are made on the equivalence of just asking ChatGPT or Claude, where should I put my GBS centre? And he goes, oh, these are the good locations, and just spits out the same locations for everyone. Whereas I don't think people are really looking contextually as to, okay, what's the growth rate of these service centres? What's the sustainability of them? What are the other options? There's very little inventiveness and creativity around this at the moment. It's, the same Bangalore, Pune, Manila, it's Krakow, whatever. Like it's a very traditional paths for GBS, and I think it's the whole study made me chuckle a little bit, if I'm going to be honest.
I think it's because they're still not, broadly speaking, that these decisions are made based on foreign direct investment incentives and cost and not availability of talent, right?
Yep.
And I think that's just the reality. And those organisations that are then including the availability of talent are the ones that are managing to find the kind of next spots. So they're still getting the investment, but they're managing to get in first. But the reality is that the minute somewhere becomes a next spot for a GBS centre, it's going to become a hotspot over the course of the year. That's just the reality of the way that this market works. So I'm with you. I think I was going to say it's a bit of a non-story, but nobody is saying that the labour market is going to get any easier for organisations. We've got a big demographic crunch coming. We've got big shifts in attitudes to migration and mobility around the world, and then we've got AI. I mean, it's just that all of those things combined mean that the labour market is not going to get any easier. The fact that they've focused on GBS centres, I'm not sure is that exciting. Sorry, Deloitte.
And it's quite cyclical, isn't it? With the centres, they tend to go to certain locations and then often come back to nearshore and then back again. And I think we're starting to see history repeating itself.
Yes, absolutely. Speaking of history repeating itself, Alan, please can I talk to Kim?
You can. Time to put Kim in the hot seat, or back in the hot seat, anyway. So, Alison, over to you. Let's crack on with the main reason we're here.
Cool, fab, thank you. Kim, I've been really looking forward to this one. Can you, so start off, you gave a summary of your background before, and Alan summarised it beautifully as I think you were a TI rock star or a superstar, something. Anyway, not wearing a cape. Can you talk about the latest move? So what does head of global research at AMS mean, do, why?
Good question. And obviously, I think we're quite unique, certainly in the role that I've been in previously, where, looking at the impact of what's happening across hundreds of different organizations in different locations in different industries. And one of the things that we've noticed is that there's a lot of stuff out there in the market, but there's a lack of real strong, reliable, data-led research that actually points to some strategic thinking around what to do next. And we see some organizations are starting to do that. I think, like class included, in terms of what you're able to, the data that you're able to provide and the kind of the so what that you're able to get out of it. And what we really wanted to do with the research lab was to create some content that's based on our proprietary data that we have, that's been gathering globally over the last 6 years plus, that and we can bring that to the market and really help to inform thinking of TA leaders and CHROs are out there, because there's just so much at their fingertips. And I think it's not that there isn't the information that's available, it's that there's too much to kind of wade through and to really do some of that for them and point to how they can make some decisions without going down a rabbit hole of 50 or 60 reports every week.
So kind of a trusted source or go-to for your clients, for TA leaders, for who?
Yeah, for all of the above, the market first and foremost, but also our clients as well, but also to give them the practical next steps as well, because we've often found reading through a lot of the research that's out there, it is quite high level, and to really bring it down to what it means for them in terms of immediate next steps and long term.
That's really cool. So actually, here is the research, here is the insight, this is what you need to do about it. Yeah, okay. So maybe at the end of this conversation, when we're talking about top tips, maybe that would be really interesting. Well, let's make it practical tips rather than kind of top tips for thinking. That would be brilliant. Can you talk a bit about how TI has evolved at AMS? So I know we're kind of moving out of the research role, but going back into TI, how's it evolved? Because the business had a TI team reasonably early for staffing organisations. Forgive me for that, that kind of generic statement. But so 2020 was reasonably early, and then just interested to see how it's evolved in the last 5 years.
Yeah, it's very much become part and parcel of our day-to-day, and in terms of what we offer to our clients, but what we do for ourselves too. So I think when we started off, it was very much a kind of an add-on. It was a kind of an extra piece that our clients could use, and it was very new to a lot of our clients. And fast forward to today, and it is connected to every part of what we're trying to do. So whether it's right at the very beginning of a process of having that TI information available before a requisition is even raised, right the way through the entire process. So it really has altered in that respect. It's also moved much more to self-service. In the early days, whenever that information was not as freely available, it was obviously my team that was creating that content and explaining it and showing individuals how to apply it. Fast forward to now, we've done a lot of education throughout the organisation to give individuals some of those skills themselves, so that they are using that lens with whatever task that they're doing. A little bit like, tech used to be very much a standalone bit of most businesses, and whereas now it's part of everybody's job in terms of we're expected to go to help desks ourselves and sort those things out. And it's the same with TI. We really want individuals to be involved with gathering that information and using it at as many points of the process they can. There are obviously challenges with that too. Not data literacy is one. I think there's a huge amount of people that have a little bit of an inbuilt fear of data, a little bit like, some kids just naturally don't, or feel like they don't like, maths at school because maybe they've had a bad teacher or they've just had a bad experience. And certainly from what I've seen, a lot of individuals in different roles have a kind of innate fear of data because they're not quite sure what to do with it or how to read it. And I think once you've gone through that process of really helping them to understand it, for many of them, it is game changing.
So there's been you're kind of disseminating the data now to your embedded TA leads on client sites rather than the TI team centrally delivering them. Is that right?
To some degree, yes. Yeah. Certainly for the much more transactional pieces of TI that we would have done. There's still, obviously, we have still got a core team, and actually we've introduced new roles which are, we call them insights and intelligence partners, that face off to every one of our clients and every part of our internal business, that actually work with them to really build TI into every bit of what they do, and also to combine all of the other bits of data that are available. So if there's, Beehive reports or different bits of MI that's kind of dotted about the place, that all of that is pulled together by one individual. There may be teams working in the background that are actually producing the reports, but that one individual is the face of all things data. And we find that has really elevated what we're able to do, because suddenly you're not just talking about the kind of the TI element, you're talking about all of the available data sources, and that gives us a much more panoramic view of what's happening.
Really interesting. How have you seen the demands of clients change?
Absolutely. I think if I even think back, 6-7 years ago, clients were, it was a little bit mystical to them in terms of, it was like, we'll give you some money and you give us back a report which will solve all our problems. I think now clients are much more savvy, and rightly so, with what's available, but there's also an expectation that should be very much part and parcel of what they get from anyone that they're working with. It shouldn't be just something that is wildly expensive or added on to what they do. So there's a much higher expectation that really good quality insights and intelligence will be part and parcel.
Are you seeing the things that they're asking change?
To some, I think there's still some at the very core that are just, where can we find the right people with the right skills at the right time? I think that's almost always at the crux of what their ask is. I think it's the context around how they're asking it is changing. It's the speed at which they want that information, and the application of it that's changing more than the actual ask itself.
And are you seeing them asking, because that sounds like it's still, forgive me, quite transactional BI. Are you seeing a move towards the more strategic questions over, do we buy or do we build? Or what do we do from skills perspective? And how are you feeding into that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot more, asks coming to us at an earlier stage, which is obviously definitely what we like to see, because no one likes to get an ask after a decision's been made, just so that they can back up a decision. But getting it at that early stage, and we're seeing more of that feeding into the forecasts, kind of the business plans for the next 5+ years. And I think for us, it's really important about having the conversation with them around what they're trying to solve for with the asks that they have, and what they want to get out of it at the end of the day. I think that is at the heart of it in terms of how we're feeding into it.
Do you think there's a difference when you first start working with a client? Have they typically had an insights team beforehand, or is the fact that they're then moving into this space, oh, hold on a minute, we didn't know this existed?
I think, a few years ago that might have been the case. I think now they've either had some type of an insights kind of facility, but more likely it's that they've had access to the tools and the licenses. What we see often is that, sometimes clients will have purchased quite a lot. And we see this more in global clients, where they'll purchase a lot of licenses and make them freely available. And then they find that because they haven't necessarily, provided the same amount of training, or again, that whole data literacy piece, that the tools aren't used as effectively as they could be.
Yeah.
And then there's an assumption then that there's something wrong with the tool, or that there's something wrong with TI, when that's just not the case at all. It's the misapplication of those tools.
Do you see any correlation? I've been trying to find for years, so if you say yes, I'd be really pleased. A correlation between the size of a business or a vertical that they are in and how strategically they are using TI, or is it still completely random?
Ooh, I think this is a really interesting one, because we see it across different industries. There's some industries that are they have a much bigger appetite for it, and they use it, much more heavily. If I look at industries like investment banking, technology, the pharmaceutical industries, they are really, really switched on when it comes to things like that. I think when you look at some of the industries, like even retail banking, not that they don't have the appetite for it, but the uptake is less so. So there's an interesting kind of dynamic across different industries, and even sometimes within skill sets within those industries. It's like you, I've been looking for a correlation. And I hate to use the word that I feel, because I feel like that's not then quantifiable, but I feel that there is. I just haven't found the data to back it up yet.
I'm completely. There must be something to do with the size of business and the shape of that business and what they do, and and I keep landing at the moment on. I think it depends on how commercial the individuals are within that organisation when it comes to human resources, and that feels like the wrong. That feels like the wrong output. Right? There needs to be a better answer than that, because I'm bored of people bashing HR.
I think you're absolutely right. I think it depends who's championing it. If you have someone who firmly believes in it, and is willing to invest in it, then you see a much bigger uptake.
It's really interesting. I'm not sure I can mention the company. But I did 2 sessions last week on how to tell stories with data to a Fortune 100 business, and they were having a global people and culture development day, and this was all about how do you use data, what does labour market data do, how can you tell stories with it, what are the user cases. This is a massive organisation in one of the sectors that we've just talked about, but I loved the fact that they were doing this as part of their development day. There were 80 HR leaders on 2 of those, over those 2 sessions. You just think it's fascinating that, again, what we take as kind of day-to-day knowledge, because we've been so immersed in this industry for such a long time, is still seen as a development tool within a large organisation. So, that's got to be a tick. Can you talk about the new research that has just been published? So I'd be really keen. So the one about TA landscape, offer declines and dropout rates.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Absolutely. So this was a bit of a labour of love for us. It was one of our first pieces that we have published under the new research lab, and it was, I think, around 400,000 hiring records that we'd aggregated over just under 100 countries. And we spanned it from 2020 right through to 2025, so that we can get kind of as broad as reach as possible, to be able to really pull out some of the trends that we were seeing that were happening. We tried to cover as many job families and seniority levels as we could within that. And I think we find, I mean, there were some very obvious findings that we found within it. I mean, of course, things don't finish whenever candidates accept an offer. I think that's very obvious. But some of the kind of the rationale that we found behind it was fascinating to see how that changed across different regions, different industries, and then different skill sets within those industries. And I think being able to tie it through to the cost in terms of the time to hire, that we saw that whenever offers were declined, whenever they significantly declined, that it was a 15% increase in time to hire, and being able to link that through was really valuable, because I think sometimes it's one of those things, it's a very obvious statement. So of course people saying no is going to cost you money, but actually seeing it in the kind of cold hard data fact makes it, it really helps people to say, well, okay, I need to do something about it.
Yeah, I thought what was interesting was this is it wasn't, clearly compensation played a role. But if you had asked me beforehand, I would have said that people would not start having accepted an offer because they either got a better offer for more money, and that would be 70 or 80% of them. That would have been completely wrong based on this research. And actually, personal reasons, hiring process, lack of flexible working, all of the sorts of things that we inherently know are not more important, but more important than I thought they would be.
Yeah.
That's probably a better way of putting it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why we pulled out. Obviously, compensation was pulled out as a separate reason, but getting a more competitive offer, and the competitive bit was covered so many different factors, and not just, depending, and it was very difficult actually to pull it out any further than that, because it was so individualized in terms of those different reasons. But from everything you mentioned, from flexibility through to other different benefits, through to the projects that they'd be working on, all of that was often covered under the umbrella of having a more competitive offer.
Can you talk about, you put a spotlight on the great flattening in there. Talk to us about what that is, and what you saw.
It's a good question. And actually, I'm going to do that. I think not a political answer, I'm not answering, but we're going to do a bigger piece on that over the next week or two, which expands on it. So I don't want to steal the thunder on that, but watch this space and we'll bring it through. It was a term that we saw that we thought was really interesting. We wanted to pull it through into the research, because we felt it really did play a part. So I will say, watch.
I completely get that, because I read it and went, oh, there's much more in there.
Yeah.
For those people that haven't had a chance to read this report yet, which is the Research Lab Offer Declines and Dropouts, it's available clearly online from the AMS website. But actually, it talks about the declining demand for management and leadership layers. Yeah. Which links back to what we were talking about earlier as businesses prioritise agility, right, in response to what's happening in the economy. So I think it's really, really interesting that you're seeing that and then picking up and saying, okay, are we seeing this, and are we seeing it at all levels? So I look forward to that. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Was there anything on, and forgive me, I haven't read the report in depth, which is why I'm asking you questions about it. Was there anything that came across globally that was really obvious, or something surprising that we wouldn't have seen in the offer starter ratio?
I think probably the most obvious thing was, sales is most volatile. I think that probably comes as no surprise. I think probably one of the big surprising things that we saw was around project management. I think that came left field for all of us as we were doing the research, so much so that we checked that output at least 3 times to make sure that we weren't hallucinating anything with the data. But I think it really, what we're seeing there can be explained a lot by the shift to much more change management that we're seeing across different organizations, where the appetite for people to manage those change projects is unlike anything we've ever seen before. And so that really, it was a surprising data point that we saw, but it definitely can be explained by the rate of change projects that we're seeing across different organizations.
I think the bit for me that was interesting then, when you looked at the global data, was that APAC clearly has remained pretty strong and consistent, which ties in culturally in many ways to behaviour there. But Japan showed a decreasing offer to starter ratio, which felt, again, that was another piece where you go, oh, that feels weird, given how that labour market has performed.
Yeah, and there were some not anomalies, I would say, but some interesting kind of quirks that we saw in some of that research, and I think those are definitely areas to watch in future, because they definitely were reacting differently to the rest of the trends that we saw across the report.
Yeah, okay, really interesting. What advice, so there's lots of recommendations at the end of this, what advice would you give to an in-house recruiter on this basis?
I think more than anything, and certainly some of the other research that we've done subsequently, we did an interesting piece on CSAT and hiring manager satisfaction. And one of the things that we uncovered was that even if a process has been really bumpy and it's, things have gone up and down, or on the flip side, if it's gone phenomenally well, what impacts satisfaction and the outcome more than anything else is the recruiter and sourcer relationship with the candidate, in terms of how successful that's been. And I think that for me would be the biggest recommendation that comes out of particularly the offer decline piece, but some of the other bits that we've done too, that despite all of the the tech advances and all of the different strategies that you can apply, the biggest difference that you can make to your process is still through your people. They still having that post-offer engagement can be the difference between an offer being accepted and seen through and it being declined.
Which is amazing. If we think about what's happening in the marketplace and how much we're automating the recruitment process, it's almost, I took the words out of my own mouth. That's about making the process better, right? Don't make me wait for a response. Make sure that I get a response really fast. Make sure that you're telling me what the next step is. All of that piece is just process related, and that's what the automation is doing well. But at the end of the day, it's still about, do I like you?
Yeah.
That's just really big. Toby, have you got anything to comment on that? Because it feels like you should have. You and Alan feels like you should have.
I've just commented in the chat that I think we're both just sitting back and listening, because it's really, really interesting.
It's like,
I think my fear is that most TA leaders are getting squeezed on costs. So they look at AI and automation and tech and go, oh, I can improve my efficiency here. And so instead of a recruiter we've known for years that recruiters over 15 recs, the service level goes down through the floor. And yet we still ramp recruiters up at 40, 50, 60, 70 recs a pop. And my fear is that we use the tech to give that efficiency gain and just ramp recruiters up even more. Whereas this research is really clearly showing, use the tech to give time back to recruiters so they can spend the time to build the relationship and have the value add. I'm just terrified that TA leaders are going to take the wrong end of the stick and run with it.
Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right, Toby. It's about making the processes much more slick and efficient, so that recruiters and sourcers are freed up to do this, the important bit, which is building that relationship and maintaining that relationship with the candidate. That's what the candidates want. That's what the recruiters and sourcers want. But you're right. I think that pressure, and that's for me what's important to get the output of this type of research into the right hands.
Very interesting. Let me bring it back and a little bit back to broader talent intelligence. Kim, you are a thought leader in this space. What is next for TI?
Oh, good question. I think for me, it's more of the self-service piece. I think in some cases we still shy a little bit away from that, and that is can be a little bit trial and error, because there's always that risk, and when you give people access to more information, that there's mistakes that happen along the way. But I think that has to be part of the process. But I also think we need to do much more for TI in terms of centralizing all of the data that we have available, and somehow speeding up the access to the final, final piece of output. I think there will always be a need for time, because it's never going to be necessarily at a push of a button, and sometimes nor should it be, because I think part of understanding what people need within TI and what they get at the end of it is an important part of the process. But we do need to find ways to be more creative with how we operate with all of that data, and getting the right sets of data to the right people at the right time. Because I think more and more we have just had more and more data at our disposal, and there's more that we could put into all of the TI reports that we produce. But is anybody actually reading it at the end of the day? So I think that's what's next for me. It's about centralizing it all and making it much more, much more digestible, and maybe looking at different formats in terms of how we do that.
I thought you were going to say more of the same to start off with. I was like, oh, that wasn't quite what I was
That's not very exciting.
I'm pleased you went somewhere else with that. I was like, no, I don't want more of the same. That's like, oh. But I think centralising more of the data for me is that's where it's going. And I've talked for donkey's years about you need to be able to bring internal data and external data together in order to make really sensible decisions about your workforce. And I think we've talked about people analytics and talent intelligence and how they all sit together and where there are differences and similarities. So I think I'm glad it's not more of the same. Can I ask you the same question? So if you were a smaller staffing firm right now, you've got big challenges going on in the world of work. You must be looking up at some of the thought leadership that AMS is putting out and Lightcast is putting out and others, and going, how do we play in that world, right? What should we be doing? Have you got any tips for them? So sort of advice for smaller staffing firms?
I think for them, it's really about focusing on the basics. If I had my time all over again to do things, I'm sure I probably would have done things slightly differently. It's very easy to kind of look at the end product and kind of throw everything at it. It's about choosing one thing or two things that you can focus on and focus on well. And I think that would be my recommendation. Look at the basics of what you need, and focus on that, and then build on it and expand it out. I think trying to solve it all in one go, it will end up creating more problems for yourself, and you will have very little engagement with what you're producing. I think that organic growth is really important when it comes to TI.
Really interesting. You alluded earlier to the Great Flattening as a new piece of research that's coming up. What else can we expect out of the research, the new kind of research stood up function within AMS this year?
So a couple of different things that we're doing, and some, again, talking about going back to basics, some basic things that we're covering off simply because of the demand and some of the asks that we're getting through. So we are focusing on some things like, labour market overviews or employment kind of situation updates, but also then some industry kind of deep dives and newsletters to focus on the impact of what's happening in each industry, and obviously taking our perspective in terms of some of the data that we have that focuses on that. And then some more big pieces like the offer to clients piece that we did. We're going to look at kind of the skills mismatch that I alluded to there in terms of our educations and universities preparing students for tomorrow's jobs. We're going to look at kind of the stores to supply chains and how holiday hiring is changing, because we've seen quite a few changes over the last couple of years on that front. We're also going to look at some of the employment law changes that are coming up towards the end of the year, and the good old EU Pay Transparency Directive that's in there too. And then going into next year, we're hoping to do some big pieces based on our proprietary data. So really start to get out there and share some of the key metrics, I guess, that matter to most TA professionals in terms of what their, the metrics that they would be measured on, and really give them something to benchmark based on those metrics, because there's a big space I feel in the industry in that, in terms of real deep benchmarks that are based on a broad data set. So we're hoping to bring some of those to the market next year.
That's so interesting. And blimey, how busy are you guys going to be? I remember when I first set up Strategens, one of our investors was going, well, you just create benchmarks, don't you? And I remember sort of shivering a bit and going, that's a bit of a boring word. But actually, that's where the traction comes within a business, isn't it? It's, how do we compare, and are we doing well or aren't we doing well? And therefore, you start to inform the decisions of where to invest rather than it just being let me just compare myself to Bob and see how he's doing.
Absolutely, and it helps them understand.
Yeah,
it helps them understand where the true challenges are, because I think so often, a lot of businesses, focus on a metric, whether it's usually it's time to hire, or it may be another metric, a cost per hire, and they go, this is a problem for us, and we've got to sort this out. But actually, if they were able to have some benchmarks to show how they were performing, not just against their competitors, but against the regions that they are operating in, and the skill sets that they're hiring for, that would give them a much clearer indication of, is that actually a challenge, or actually is that absolutely fine, but their challenge is over here in their CSAT or wherever else it might be. So I think it would be much more beneficial for organizations out there to see what the true context is that they're operating under.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're doing some increasingly more things where organisations are going, our whole workforce is going to be disrupted and we don't know what to do. And instead of going, yes, it is, let's try and eat the elephant. We're going, okay, let's just take a little bit and look at that bit and see how much that bit is going to be impacted, and see whether what are the areas where your workforce is most likely to be disrupted based on what's going on in the outside world.
Yeah.
Right, now let's focus on that area, because that's what our big challenge is, and not on the kind of bigger. Let's not try and do the whole lot. Forgive me, anyone who hasn't heard the term "eat the elephant" before. Last question from me, unless the guys have got anything else. Can you give us, you even in the new report that we read, at the end there's recommendations, there's practical insights, there's top tips. Can you give us your top X, I'm not going to limit you to, practical tips for an TA leader in a global business right now?
Well, I think probably one of the most important things they need to do is give themselves some creative space, because I think there's so much happening right now. There's so much change. There's so much expectation in terms of delivering against budgets and costs, that they very much get caught up in all of the doing rather than actually planning ahead. So I think despite how difficult that will be, actually giving themselves some creative space to think and to plan will pay them dividends in return. I think if they're always, and it's probably such a trite thing to say, but I think you're always firefighting. You don't accomplish anything at the end of the day. So I think that creative space is really important. I also think my second tip would be to find ways to give back to your team, because I've certainly noticed, over the course of the past 4 to 5 years, we take so much from our people, and there's so many demands that are put on them, and there's less and less time to actually spend developing our people and giving them opportunities that I know I certainly was very fortunate to benefit from. So I think find some time to give back to the people within your functions, so that you're able to not just develop them into and help them to reach their potential, but also so that it's an enjoyable place for them to work. And then my third tip would be a little bit of an off the wall one, but I think it would be find something outside of your professional work that makes you happy. Because again, it's so much of our work that consumes so much of our life. And I think in TA, more than any other industry, that it's very true. So I think find something that makes you happy outside of work, and that will make you a much better professional.
And find the time to do it.
Exactly.
Awesome. Absolutely awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
100%. I can't believe we're out of time already.
I know. I was like, oh, I've gone over the hour. Sorry.
That's all right. It's always a good sign, though. Kim, it's been brilliant having you back. How was it for you?
It was brilliant. I felt like I was, sitting down for a drink with old friends. So it was great. Thank you for having me.
Less of the old.
I was actually the same. I was like, we're talking about decades and old. I'm like, oh.
When I were a lad. That was fantastic insight. Thank you very much. To all of our lovely listeners out there, whether you're in HR, talent acquisition, or just a business bod who's fascinated by how data and research are revolutionising the way we think about people and work, share this episode with your friends, with your peers, with anybody you think needs to hear it. Whether you're building your first insights team or transforming your talent strategy, I think there's genuine gold in today's conversational hills. And as ever, stay curious, stay brilliant, and more importantly, stay intelligent, folks. Bye!
Bye!
Thanks for listening. Before you go, I want to remind you about our generous sponsor, Lightcast. Here's that well-spoken fellow again to tell you about their amazing product.
Lightcast is the global authority on labour market data. By collecting, analysing and refining profiles, job postings and market data globally, Lightcast provides actionable, data-driven talent intelligence, giving HR leaders the context to make better decisions. The world's top companies trust Lightcast to deliver clarity in a complex world of work. For more, visit lightcast.io.